All right, I'm going to get started on this Warhammer 40K Armiger Helverins. This is a Stompy Walker kit from the tabletop game. I don't play it, as y'all probably know. I mentioned before, but I love the vehicles. I'm probably going to be doing this one in a green scheme, maybe a red scheme. I haven't decided yet, but it'll be one of the two. And I've built this kit before. And had a lot of fun with it. The kit comes with two in the box, two complete kits. So it's a pretty good value in terms of build time, how much build time you get out of the price. So this is the second one of those. I really enjoyed the first one, and I had a great time weathering that and doing all the metallic stuff on it and everything like that. So I'm looking forward to getting started on this one. Now, if you've never built a Citadel or Games Workshop kit before, Games Workshop is the overall company. Citadel is like the sub-brand that makes the plastic kits and paint and stuff like that. But, you know, they do the call out of, you know, you need this part number and this part number and this part number. But sometimes it can be a little difficult to find the numbers and positively identify which part it goes to, because they really maximize use of space on the sprue. Now, this one isn't bad in that the numbering sequence, you've got 15 here, you've got 16 here, you got 17, 18. I mean, it actually follows. This is one of the few kits I've seen from them that follows a logical order. On some kits, this can be part 2, and the one right next to it can be part 64. And then this one can be, you know, 32, and then 27, and then 99. I mean, it can be all over the board. So be aware that when you're building one of these, it's like when I see the part on the instructions, I first look for the shape and then confirm it with the number. I don't try and necessarily look for the logical sequence because sometimes it isn't there. But just keep that in mind. It can be a little crazy when you're trying to find the parts. Another thing to point out, the Games Workshop models don't, I keep using a different name for them every time. Citadel, Games Workshop, Warhammer, whatever this thing is. They don't have a lot of alignment pins and things like that, like your more traditional models. But the way the parts are shaped, there are very positive points at which things go on. Like when I glued these on, there was this forward piece here, and it's like once you see it, as long as you pay attention to the orientation of the parts, the where it needs to go together is obvious, and there's generally other parts there that set the angles and make it real easy, because they know that people that are building this generally are not as concerned, not that they're not modelers, but they're not as concerned with construction as they are getting it painting and getting it on the gaming board. So they've done a really good job of making these. They're not snap fit by any means. They're not. You have to glue them, but they go together very well. There's very rarely any ambiguity about how things are supposed to fit. And if you're not sure with one part, just look to the next step, and the part that goes on after that will probably help you set the angle. So they do a good job in that regard when you're building these. Now, as with any model, build sequence is important. When you glue stuff together, and what you leave off and what you put on is real important. And it's especially true with these models. Like I've got this part here, which is a big chunk of mechanical part, and then there's going to be this piece of armor that goes right up here on the top, like that. Now, what I tend to do is before, and I do this with any model, but I especially find it useful with Games Workshop stuff, is I go through the instructions and I look at what the build sequence is, and the distinction I try to make is where are inner frame parts that are going to be more metallic in color, and where are the armored parts. And what I generally try to do is build up the parts that are the framework, and then leave the armored parts off, because they tend to go on, it tends to be modular enough that you can do them in chunks. So the way I'll end up doing this is I'll build up the legs, but keep the legs separate from this waist part right here. And then on the upper part, I'll leave this bit of armor off, as well as this armor that goes, I guess you'd call it the shoulder armor. I'll fully build up the guns, but I'll probably leave these little rings off because they're going to be colored like the armor parts. And so what it ends up doing is it allows me to paint essentially all of the parts that are going to be silver, kind of a metallic color, paint all of those together, and then the ones that are the armored parts, paint all of those together. And then if I need to do any small bit painting on, on each of them, I can do that. And then at the end, I can bring it together. So taking a few minutes, as with any model, but especially with these, taking a few minutes to see, okay, what's going to be the most logical breakdown really helps. A lot of times when they show it on Warhammer TV, they'll, not all the time, but quite often they'll build models up completely and then paint them. And that's for speed. But if you're trying to get detail in there and you're really trying to weather things and all that, sometimes it doesn't make much sense. So coming up with a plan is really going to be to your benefit building one of these models. Okay, I've got everything assembled into the components. I could glue more stuff together. I could glue the head on to this area and the exhaust pipes onto this. The reason I'm not is the last time I built this, I found that putting the head in just made it a little more difficult to get in there and paint some of the details, and also to get painted up under there. And there's quite a bit of detail behind the exhausts, and I also want to reserve the ability, I guess you'd say, to weather and potentially rust the exhausts separate from the frame, so I left those off. They're going to be easy enough to put on later. The guns will have certainly a slightly different metallic look to them, so I left those off. And then it's just easier to paint I guess you'd say arms, the side-mounted guns. Even though they'll go in here, there's going to be quite a number of colors on here that may not appear on here in terms of quantity. So those will be a little different. And then the legs, I thought about leaving the legs off of the waist part, but I looked at the photos of what I had done before, and I just test fitted this, and I thought, this is pretty much going to be painted fairly much the same all over. So there's not a lot of distinction, and there's nothing that's going to be really difficult to get to. So I just kind of glued all of that into one area. Then I glued this shoulder armor onto the main carapace, this turtle shell thing. And I've kept these armor pieces off because they'll just be easier to paint separately from the legs where they're going to go. I also left this little grab handle thing off. It goes right here. And I just found that when I was doing weathering before, like if I wanted to do dry brushing or dot filters or anything like that, this little thing just kind of got in the way. And because it's going to be basically metallics, I decided just to leave it off, and I can glue it on at the end. So this is the breakdown that I'm going to go with. Next step is going to be to prime it and then recheck for any seams that I may have missed, any mold seam lines or glue seams, anything like that. Fix those, reprime it again, and then get to the painting. The first painting I'm going to do is the metallics. I'm going to get everything that's metallic aside from the armor. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that with these other metallics, but anyway, I'm going to get the main metallic parts painted up, and we'll see where we go from there. All right, everything's primed. Basic priming drill was anything metallic is going to be in black. Anything that's mostly armor is going to be in gray. I think I'd mentioned earlier on in this video that I'm not going to be doing the blue scheme that they show on the box, but rather something from House Cadmus. This one right here, whichever one that is. Main thing is it's green, and I looked around and I found different variations of House Cadmus, and they all centered around green and yellow and black, and a few had a little red here and there, but I found one that honestly I'm copying because I like the way it looked, and I just kind of mapped it out on a line drawing just so I could remember, because I'm very forgetful, just so I could remember what colors I'm going to be using. But I like the way that looks, and that's the general scheme that I'm going to be going after. Now the first base coat that I'm going to put on is a 50-50 mix of a Baden Black and Lead Belcher, and I'm going to cover pretty much the whole thing. If I leave some areas with the black, I'm not going to worry about it, because there's going to be so many different effects going over this that it'll just blend in with it. But I'll start off with this very dark, somewhat metallic look to it on all the armor parts. Now, I'm not going to be getting the metal parts that are, let me restart that. It's 4:45 in the morning, and I just woke up, and I'm still foggy-brained. I'm going to be painting all the metal parts with this. I'm not going to be painting any of the armor parts or any of the metal treatments on the armor parts, the metal decorations. Those will just be Lead Belcher when I get to them. But this is going to start off very dark. With everything painted in that dark steel mixture, I'm going to give it a heavy dry brush of just plain Lead Belcher. But I'm going to be coming at it from one direction. All the paint strokes are down strokes, so that it'll leave just a little bit of shadow. And if it's patchy in places, that's okay. That's what I want. I want a really dark, metallic, heavy look to this thing. Now I'm going to sponge on some Grey Knight's steel from Citadel. This is a steely blue color. Steely blue color. It's would be real appropriate for a lot of guns and things like that. It's just got a definite blue cast to it. But I'm sponging this on because when I put later shades over this, it's going to make these sponged on parts stand out and just make the metal look really worn and old and things like that, which is what I'm going for. Here you can see a good example of all of those colors going on here. The dark color, the dry brushing, and then the sponging of the more bright metallic color, and just how it's making it look, like fairly old or worn kind of metal. I really like the way it looks. You haven't really painted anything Warhammer metallic until you add Nuln Oil to it. What I'm going to do here is just give everything a heavy coat of Nuln Oil. I'm not going to try and sop up any of the extra. I won't let it pool, like down at the bottom where it's going to leave very obvious tide marks. But everything's going to get a coat of this, which is going to kind of draw everything together, darken it down a bit, bring out the recesses and the shapes and the volumes a little better, and give us with a dull but very worn steel look. Alright, I've got everything coated in the Nuln Oil, and it's still, you may be able to tell that it's still wet, so I'm going to let that dry for a while. I think I'm going to call this a video. I think it's a pretty good start to this really cool little model, and the next video we'll get into continuing painting this. I don't know why I said we, it's me. You'll be watching. But I'll be painting more of the metallics and doing a little more dry brushing and then some detail painting on here, and then getting into painting the armor proper. Hopefully that'll all fit into the next video, and then I can look at weathering after that. Well, thank you so much for being a supporter of the work that I do, whether it's on Patreon or YouTube. I am very grateful for your support. It's what makes me be able to do this, so thank you, and I hope you are getting some enjoyment out of these exclusive videos that are coming to you as a supporter. And finally, as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.